Nigeria is known to have one of the lowest tax to gross domestic product GDP ratios in Africa, and by that is meant in the world. At about 7%, the figure pales into insignificance to what obtains in many fellow African nations, such as Ghana, where they have 13%, South Africa, where it's 26.2%, Senegal, 16.6%, Kenya, 17.3%, Egypt, 14.2%, Morocco, 27.8%, to mention a few. Even former tax-free zones, such as those in the Arab world, have embarked on tax reforms in view of the shifting focus from fossil fuels. Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates have instituted 5% value-added tax for some years now, with indications that these countries will double down and cease to be natural resource dependent due to their consistent economic diversification. Nigeria not only has a major crisis with tax to GDP ratio, we have a growing crisis with our ability to service our debts from national revenues. Most economists agree that the debt servicing to revenue ratio, as well as our total debt to revenue ratio, matters more than the usually cited debt to GDP ratio. Nigeria's debt servicing to revenue ratio hovers between anything like 80% or 90%. This is alarming enough because we are left with very little wiggle room to do anything else with our internal revenue than just to pay debts. We are most likely already in a worse situation than we were pre-2006 when our debts were cancelled by the Paris Club. Karl Marx it was who said that the philosophers have hitherto only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. So we'll be looking at what else Nigeria can do to change the fiscal space. How can we move the furniture around? What else can we fiddle with? How can we get Nigerians to pay more taxes, for example? What kind of taxes are we even talking about? How can we achieve better equity in tax administration? And many more questions in this heavily packed interview with no less than our guest today, Mr. Mujib Dada Quadri, a lawyer and public policy analyst. My name is Tokpe Fashua, and I welcome you most sincerely to this maiden session of The Nationalist, a program where we'll be speaking economics, business, finance, sociology, and politics, all with an aim to contribute our best quota to the upliftment of our fatherland, Nigeria. Thank you very much and welcome. And welcome, Mr. Mujib. It's great to have you here.
It's my honor.
Fantastic. Good stuff. So, I mean, we've had the introduction to the program, and the bottom line is the fiscal policies of Nigeria and all of that. So what do you think is wrong with our fiscal policy in Nigeria?
Actually, a lot of things are wrong. First, I think we have issues with our budgetary plan.
Okay.
Which serves as the foundation of the fiscal policy. I mean, federal government's budgetary plan. And I will address the issue why I mentioned there's a fault to that. We have issues with our tax administration, tax collection. We also have issues with our import and export. Now, this is what I mean by saying we have 40 issues with our budgetary plan, federal government's budgetary plan now. Because I feel federal government is the nerve of any federation.
Absolutely.
States have issues too, I agree.
Yeah.
But I'll be specifically addressing federal government now because it's a nerve. There's a way America has been able to transform its terrain through the influence of federal government. Now, for example, our budget is too small for our population. We have the largest GDP in Africa, and we have about 200 million population, reportedly. But our budget is smaller to the budget of Angola. Angola is not up to 150 million. Not even up 100 million.
About 40 million or so.
And they have a bigger budget. Same applies to South Africa.
Yeah.
Morocco. They have bigger budgets. So that's the foundation of the problem. When the budget, if you have to analyze the budget per head, it means federal government is spending maybe less than 200,000 naira per citizen annually.
The last time I checked it was about $140, which is less than 100,000 per person.
Practically, that cannot translate to improved wealth. I mean, well, common wealth. It can't improve to that.
But someone will say that, look, where do we fund the budget? How do we fund the budget? Is it just about making a huge budget and then you can't find money to execute your programs?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And to answer that, personally, I feel Nigeria's GDP is beyond the current GDP. I have reasons for that. We say we have the largest GDP in Africa, but I feel our GDP can still, it's far beyond that. I have reasons for that. Now, the first reason is that the informal economy is highly excluded. The informal economy is highly excluded. For example, when I was writing about the Kano-Niger rail, and I discovered that we are one of the fourth or third highest exporters to Niger Republic. And it's quite shocking. It was shocking to me because I was like, so we export this much to Niger, but it's not known. I feel there's an angle of part of informal economy that is highly, or let me say less analyzed, less captured. Now, if we were to fund this kind of, because we need big governments. Some economists will tell you, see, let's reduce expenditures, let's practice what they call austerity, let's limit public finance, let's practice small government, like some Western economists will advise us. But we need big government, fat government.
Wow.
Because the population demand, social, the human capital demand, the infrastructural demand, the social capital demand, we have a lot of demands. And we need big finance for that. This is not time for preaching of small government.
Will that not lead to, so I have two questions. Will big government not lead to more corruption? And, that's on one hand. And you mentioned the size of the budget earlier on, and you mentioned the GDP being a bit underestimated and the trade that happens between Kano, for example, and Niger. And I think I know exactly what you mean in terms of maybe trading in grains. I've been to some markets in Kano that were no market where 5 billion worth of transaction takes place in one day. But how does that translate into taxes or into revenue for government with which we can then fund the big budget that you're talking about?
Yes, I love this question. And to answer that, I would like to create a foundation to it, sir. For example, don't you think it's very disheartening that we have the largest GDP in Africa, but we're not in the first 10 highest tax to GDP in Africa?
Yes.
Country as small as, I don't want to mention Chad, but Niger Republic has higher tax to GDP than Nigeria. I confirmed it. It shows we have a lot of gap. A lot of gap to fix. Oil-rich countries like Morocco and Egypt, oil-rich that don't have oil like us, are now, not even now, they are also a rich, let me say, fairly rich tax to GDP countries with over 10%. South Africa that has diamonds and a lot of encouraging mining industry also has impressive tax to GDP economy. So we see there's a need for that demand. There's a need for that. There's a gap.
Yes, that needs to be
now.
filled.
How would we now take advantage of that gap and exploit it to our advantage? Is what I'm about to answer now.
Okay.
For example, first, there is need for us to be more innovative about how to capture the informal sector. This sector is the largest in Nigeria, but highly excluded financially and economically. For example, there's a trader money initiative, for example, lost the greatest opportunity to capture one of the largest data of the informal sector.
Why did that happen? How did they lose that opportunity?
Well, for example, when they started that scheme, we were told that there will be BVN collection, compulsory BVN collection of all traders. I can say it categorically that at the point they were not interested in the BVN collection. Monies were disbursed without BVN collection because I know of some traders in my own state that got the money without BVN. and they don't care about even refunding the money. But if the BVN, for example, was achieved, that trader money scheme was a great opportunity of accumulating data of over 20 million or 30 million informal traders, or let me say traders in the market, in Oje market in Ibadan, Gbagi market, all this nano economy or microeconomy, micro traders or nano traders.
Yes.
There's an opportunity to capture them first.
Okay.
Now, capture them, have data. There's an advantage to data mining, data capturing. Have the data first.
Data, yeah.
And what I would call honey trap. That's what this intelligence sector will use what we call honey trap. It's like trap people with something. I see you are doing something good for people.
Yeah.
But you are trapping them for a future how do I say it, entitlement.
Okay.
For example, imagine having that 30 million data of traders in the Kano, in Jigawa, in Kauranamoda. And you say, okay, see, we are going to be giving non-interest loans, or these disbursements being done by Nesao Bank, Microfinance Bank. But there will be a condition. You must get your TIN.
So we're going to be taking a break now. And when we come back, we're going to be looking at some of the sociological issues behind this low tax to GDP ratio. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show, The Nationalist, beaming to you from Trust TV. And on this show today, we've been talking about fiscal policy in Nigeria. What can we do to make it better, to make it more effective? In particular, we've been talking about the Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio, which is one of the lowest in the world, and exploring with my guest, Mr. Mujib Dada Quadri, what can we do, what can Nigeria do to make it better? So we're talking about some sociological issues, and I want you to add to that a very specific question. So what are the sociological issues, why we got here in the first place? In all the countries in the world, in all the countries in Africa, we saw the figures. Kenya, 17%, Ghana, 17.3%, Morocco, 26%, and all of these numbers, and Senegal, something like 18%. And here we are in Nigeria, we're struggling with 6% of GDP, tax to GDP ratio, and we're one of perhaps the largest economy in Africa, and we're supposed to be the trailblazer. What could have happened on that? And then what can we do, okay, to move that number from 6-7% to about 15%? What do you think?
First, I think we have to explore the historical background to it. In the 60s, the tax to GDP ratio was not this bad. In fact, I heard that in some community meetings, we'll be challenging each other. Have you paid your tax?
Wow.
We had something like Jangali, the cattle tax. It's eventually, because of the oil money, we discovered that we encountered an easy way out. And
we took that easy way out.
Took that easy way without preparing for the plan B. Interestingly, the oil Jews, let me call it the oil Jews, didn't only truncate the tax-based economy, it also affected other aspects of the economy, which we're now clamoring for diversification and all the rest. And I think tax economy is part of that diversification. But I must also point it out that if we are calling for tax economy,
right,
we are not saying that people should be tax trapped. I'm not an advocate of the kind of Western tax system, which I feel is quite...
You see, and I think that's why we're not even comparing in this research, we're not comparing with the West. We're looking at even within Africa here, you know, what's going on.
Yeah, so I think what we should, and this is what I mean by that tax trap.
And how do we even convince our people to please pay for everybody's good?
Yeah, I think before I get to issue of encouraging and making people pay, we have to understand that we're not talking about increasing taxes now. To start with, we have to expand the tax net. We don't have to increase taxes now. That's why when the VAT was increased, I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I disagreed with that policy. And Some notable Nigerians also wrote against that. We just have to expand. There are many areas of informal sector. I'm stressing informal sector.
Right.
They're not paying due taxes. People paying taxes in Nigeria is more of the formal sector, the corporate sector. The only taxes being paid by the informal sector is likely maybe the VAT, and that is a sort of, unavoidable tax. You have to pay it, I think, the VAT system. Now, how do you allow people to pay? How do we encourage people to pay? First, like I said, we have to practice that honest trap of a thing. First, we can't just bombard people with taxes. We have to include incentives to attract people first. There's what they call tax investment also. And part of that tax investment, it's not just about the logistics and the collection. It's the incentivizing is also a strategy. And that's why we have what they call tax refunds in Western countries. These are strategies to encourage people. And people will pay if they see these incentives. I'm convinced about that because, for example, people pay a lot of dues for these trade union. In the markets, we have many unions, and they pay. You have to pay them. You have to pay, and people pay even without seeing the effect of the payment. National union will get money from them. The tailors union, everybody will come to the market and collect money from dues from people, and people pay without seeing the effect, and they still pay.
For example, like in the transport sector, if you have to drive your taxi or your bus and all of that, there's a certain payment you pay every day to the guys in the road union, whatever it is, they call their name. And sometimes it can be substantial. If you come there every day, you pay, let's say you pay 2,000 every day, multiply by 300 days in a year, that's 600,000 you've paid. That's substantial. However, the government seems to have left that space to those unions, informal bodies, and we see that sometimes the unions become very powerful and very rich, and they do and undo. I think but I'm worried. What happened to Nigeria apart from, is it the crude only? Can we blame it only on the crude? As an economist, I'm used to trying not to explain a phenomenon away by only one variable. So we're all Africans. If Egypt has done what they can do, Morocco, Senegal, Ghana, Kenya, why Nigeria? Why are we holding the short end of the stick? And again, the second question I pose to you is that, I'm sure you heard the Minister of State for Petroleum recently say that, unfortunately, crude oil is no longer an advantage to Nigeria. If the price goes up, we are going to suffer more. Okay? Meaning that, where should we find the sense of, sense of urgency to backtrack on this policy and do the right thing?
Well, as for the subsidy, I have a lot of reservations. First, about the foundation of that subsidy. I don't belong to the school of people that advocates for head to be cut to solve headache. There are a lot of things attached to that subsidy. Our economy is highly fuel-based, so I will never support total removal of subsidy.
You mean that you remove the petroleum subsidy?
I don't support that.
Yeah, though that's not the what he was saying, the minister, was that if the price of crude oil goes up, Nigeria will suffer more. And because of several things, the cost of production of crude oil is one of the highest in the world at about $30 per barrel. And they couldn't get new investors to come in and add, to the investment. And even that there was a point when OPEC asked them to cut down 100,000 barrels, they went and mistakenly cut down 300,000 barrels. And now they're finding it difficult. So that's one. I'm just saying that we focused on crude oil because we found crude oil, like you said, which is very apt observation, in the 60s, in the 70s, even some point in the 70s, we were having a much higher tax to GDP ratio, but all of a sudden we found crude oil, easy money, everybody went to sleep. Now we're seeing that the crude oil is a problem now. How do we backtrack?
Well, I won't say crude oil is a problem yet, because outside that oil, we also have gas.
Okay, yes,
which is an advantage now, which ought to have been an advantage long before now. 2007, 2008, I think Yar'Adua's regime had a gas plan. And imagine us working on that gas plan in 2009. We wouldn't be the mate of Algeria in gas potential or gas economy. We would rather be competing with the European countries like Norway and all the rest. But the foundation of the oil sector has not been addressed before talking about the cost of subsidy. For example, the minister himself, State Minister for State Oil, Petroleum, mentioned that he's not sure of the total numbers of barrels we consume.
Yes, that's another thing. So we're not sure of the barrels that we get from the ground every day. We're not sure of what we consume. But of course, this is not the oil and gas. I think we'll bring you in for the oil and gas one later, because you are in the oil and gas sector as well, But my concern today is about this, this revenue and the fact that, unfortunately, we're not getting enough revenue from crude oil. And in fact, if you like, the gas, from the NLNG, yes, that's working. But we're junior partners sort of in that sector, because the major oil majors ensure that they keyed into that. And perhaps that's the reason why that is still operational today. But a lot of problems. The oil majors have even gone deep sea now, most of them, and what have you. So that's that. But they're still on the focus of, fiscal policy, how can we make it better? And I want to say this, like, when we're talking of taxes, we're not necessarily talking about personal income tax, so that people won't panic. Nobody likes to pay taxes, Personal income tax, company income tax, we're not saying we should increase those. But what a government is entitled to is not only taxation, it's also fees, fines, dues, levies, rates, rent. Okay, these are 6 different areas, which will be more. And I must say, before I let you chip in, that when the APC came in 2015, they held an economic summit in the Hilton, which I was there. And in plenary, they asked one lady got up, a white woman, and asked a question and said, I've been hearing people complaining about no money to fund the budget. Nigeria is the only country I've been where nobody gets fined for overspeeding. How then do you intend to fund your budget? And she sat down, and that question was never addressed. So what do you have to say about some of these things?
I will mention 2 key issues. And one escaped my mind when I was talking about capturing the informal sector, formalizing the informal sector. And that's the advantage of digitization. We are in a very, we have an advantage with the smart world now, and we have a lot of smart technologies. There's a way we can digitize this informal sector. At least look at this POS revolution. Look at this mobile banking revolution. It's an hint to let us know how we can revolutionize that sector by deploying more digital tools, simple digital tools to capture the informal sector and to attract them. And that's linked to cashless economy too.
Right.
Now, but lastly, about the dues, about the levies, this is where I will now bring in the state governments and the local governments. I was going
to ask you about states.
Because actually, they are, let's be fair to federal government, recently, FIRS has, just yesterday or 2 days ago, FIRS confirmed raising the IGR to 1.4 trillion, I think, 1.4 trillion naira, which is still low compared to these African countries we mentioned, but at least compared to other administrations, they've moved on, and it shows they can do more if they want to. But what about the state government and local governments? The states are too comfortable with federal allocations, and it's one of the reasons why I think part of our federal policy, federalism policy, should also include economic policies. For example, this might sound unpopular, but practical. For example, there is a need for federal government to reward states with higher non-oil revenue generation.
Yes, the ones that come with the... You're right. This is a very important policy statement. To say that the ones that generate the more will get something additional, maybe from the FAC. A certain, but of course, that may be a matter for constitutional amendment. Yes. Except there's another fund from which the federal government could pay. But I think it's a very valid point to say that the federal should try and reward the states that generate so that they can work harder. If you know that if you can hit a certain limit, you will get an extra amount of money. Why not if not? But not many of the states are also very accountable, So I think it's a very wide conversation. However, my producer is telling me I'm really very short of time. I wish we could talk about things like property taxes, which are due to the states. And every state assembly that I've seen have moved heavily against property taxes because the same people who are the big men in the state assemblies are the ones that are supposed to make the law. They don't want to pay 1 naira. Things like capital gains taxes that are not really adhered to in this country, luxury taxes that Okonjo-Iweala, as the minister, was talking about, which you never, because the rich people are protecting themselves. Sin taxes, which was introduced recently, sugar taxes, and the manufacturers are kicking against it. So I think there's a point at which we need to actually agree on some of these things and know that Nigeria is ours to build. And I think that's what the Nationalist, this program is about. I want to thank you for coming on this show, my first guest, actually. We hope to bring you in a couple of times. And you're very welcome, Mr. Muji.
I'm very honored.
Okay, thank you very much, viewers, for staying tuned and listening to us today. Please join us next time, could be next week, when we'll come to you with another topic, a very interesting topic. Thanks for staying with us.